All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining our Lobby Day 2026 training session. My name is Mike Kreisberg. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager at Abundant Housing, and I'll be organizing, conducting, running this training. Okay, so welcome. Here's the agenda for today. Since I know there's actually a decent amount of new folks in the room, which is really great, I'm going to go over briefly our mission and the work that we do at Abundant Housing Massachusetts, just to better situate Lobby Day within our theory of change and our mission. So we're going to talk about why we're doing this Lobby Day, to give a little context on the legislative session. We're going to review a timeline of this session and then really talk in detail about our priority bill, the thing that we're going to be lobbying around, which is an act to promote Yes in My Backyard. Then we'll get into the run of show, including going over the scheduled meetings and the literature drops. I'll explain the difference between the two of those when we get to that portion of the training. We'll, of course, talk about preparing for Lobby Day, and then, as I mentioned, we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. So, just starting real quick with our mission and who we are at Abundant Housing Massachusetts. As our name suggests, we stand up for abundant housing for all communities in Massachusetts. We drive policy at the state and local level by identifying pro-housing changemakers, building the power of local organizations, and connecting a statewide network. And really, just to give a little bit more detail here and how I like to think about our work, we have mainly three buckets of work. The first one being community organizing. If you've interacted with Abundant Housing before, you've probably met one of our fantastic organizers, and they will help organize pro-housing groups and individuals and municipalities across Massachusetts, whether they're fighting for parking reform in Boston or an MBTA community zoning district in one of those 177 lucky cities and towns. The second bucket of work is our policy work, which is what I mostly focus on and why you're here today. That includes our statewide policy agenda, all of our lobbying efforts, our work on Beacon Hill and trying to enact state level policy change. And then the third bucket of work, which is our newest bucket, is our electoral or political work. This is where we're endorsing candidates and really trying to create, foster, support the next generation of pro-housing leadership in Massachusetts. That's just a little bit about what we do here at AHMA. Okay, so why Lobby Day? Why are we doing this? And really the first reason is that we want to, as politely as possible, apply some political pressure. The legislature in Massachusetts is a two-year legislative session. There's thousands of bills that get filed, and particularly as we're coming to the end of this legislative session, we want to generate that sense of urgency around some of these policy priorities, and that now is the time to do that. And importantly, there are voters, there are your constituents who want to see this happen and want to see it enough that they're willing to take time out of their workday, out of their busy days to come to the State House and talk to you personally about why this is important. The second piece is really just doing some education for lawmakers and their staff. Again, lawmakers have to have a level of expertise in many different issues, and housing and zoning reform in particular is just one of them. So Lobby Day is a opportunity for some of us who are a little bit more well versed in these subjects to be able to talk to lawmakers and their staff about how the YIMBY bill works, why it's important, how zoning reform intersects with housing affordability, and why we need to see it now. This is all a great day to be doing that. The third piece here is to cut through the noise. As I mentioned, I think there was about 8,000 bills that were filed at the beginning of this legislative session. So there's a lot of bills, there's a lot of policies out there, there's a lot of ideas. There's housing affordability, there's climate change, there's voting rights, there's education, there's social media, there's online gambling. There's a ton of different issues that the legislature is working through right now, and it's hard to stand out. It's hard to get them to pick their noses up and pay attention to a certain issue. So by bringing, hopefully 100+ advocates to the State House, walking around the State House with matching T-shirts, generating some noise, this can, cut through some of the noise of the other bills and show that this is something that's worth engaging in and that there's a constituency who wants to see these reforms passed. And then the last piece here actually doesn't have to do with direct policy change, but really fostering connections among advocates. As I talked about in our mission statement earlier, one of the things that we were founded to do and part of our mission is to connect the pro-housing elements across Massachusetts with each other, so they can learn from each other, work better, establish community with each other. And our lobby day is one way to do it. Here's a picture from last year. Look at all those communication, all those connections that are being fostered. We had, like I said, about 100 people come last year. It was really a great opportunity for a lot of folks to meet. And I know that one thing that directly came out of our lobby day, outside of hopefully some policy change, was that a bunch of our advocates from the North Shore were able to meet each other and cooked up this idea of doing a North Shore summer social that eventually was attended by about 75 people, including the lieutenant governor, including local state reps, and was really, I think, a catalyzing effort for some of the organizing that we've done on the North Shore. So this is, hopefully one of the things that we hope to achieve by doing this lobby day and generating some of these connections. Okay, moving on here to the timeline, just to get folks situated as to where we are. So Massachusetts operates on a 2-year legislative session. So the legislative session actually officially began on January 1st, 2025. January is also when we filed our YIMBY bill. In February of 2025, it gets assigned to the relevant committee. For us, it was sent to the Housing Committee. In September, some folks may remember there was a hearing for the YIMBY bill, uh, which we turned out some folks were for testimony, and we also testified at. Then in December, and this is where things get a little bit confusing, the Senate decided to move forward or to advance the YIMBY bill out of the Housing Committee with a favorable report and sent that to the Committee on Ways and Means. The House, which also has its own version of the YIMBY bill, decided not to do that. So right now it's technically still sitting in the Housing Committee, even though there was a February 2026 deadline where it should have moved out by then, but it's currently still sitting in the Housing Committee. So we have a lot of work really to do in the House, but this is where things begin to splinter a little bit, where the Senate advanced this bill and made some changes to it, which I'll get into in a couple slides. And the House has kind of stayed where it is and currently hasn't seen any changes. Picking up recently, so one of the legislature, of course, has to pass a budget. We're in the middle of budget season right now. At the end of April, the House passed their budget and sent it over to the Senate. The Senate is currently debating their budget, and that budget will pass, in the next week or so. So that's happening right now. That final budget is then due to the governor by June 30th, although sometimes it does get sent after that date. And the formal legislative session ends on July 31st. So we have, what is it right now? It's mid-May, so we have the rest of May, June, July for formal legislative session. And I think that's really the timeline that folks should be thinking about as to when we're asking our bill or these policies to get passes before that July 31st deadline. Although there is technically opportunities for some additional work to happen afterwards, for all intents and purposes here, really focusing in on that July 31st deadline. Okay, so moving on to our priority bill and Act to Promote Yes in My Backyard. As I mentioned, there's kind of two versions that are floating around right now. We'll start with the House version here. So the main pieces of it and the parts that we really are focusing on are allowing small multifamily housing by right. This means that if passed, this bill would legalize up to 3 homes on all lots connected across the state. Those homes could be duplexes, triplexes, or townhomes. Um, and then if a lot is connected to water and sewer, then you would be allowed to build up to 5 homes on that lot. So also including quadplexes or again, more townhomes, but kind of this two-tiered upzoning, whereby if you're connected to water and sewer, you would have to allow the local zoning would have to allow up to 3 homes or up to 5 homes by right. And if it wasn't connected to water and sewer, allowing up to 3 homes by right. Again, of course, this is not mandating that those homes be built, just changing the zoning so that it allows those homes to be built. The second piece here has to do with parking flexibility. And so in the House version, that would simply remove minimum parking requirements for new residential developments. Um, can get into a little bit more of the details maybe later if folks have questions. The long and short of it right now is that there's across Massachusetts a whole variety of minimum parking requirements that force home builders to overbuild the amount of parking that is needed. Overbuilding parking, increased costs, waste land, and overall makes it more difficult to build more housing and more reasonably priced housing. And then the last priority piece here is right sizing lots. And there's two pieces to this. One is removing minimum lot size requirements, very similar to the parking flexibility piece. And then the other one is streamlining lot splitting so that if somebody has a home on a larger lot, say it's, 30,000 square feet, 40,000 square feet the lot, then they could easily subdivide that lot to put new homes on them. And this is a way like Massachusetts is fairly built out and fairly suburbanized. And we have actually very, very large lots. So this is attempting to create some new tools that allow for more infill development. Okay, and now the Senate version. So the Senate version is mostly the same as the House version, but there are a few key tweaks. The first one is on parking. Parking reform. So as the House version would remove minimum parking requirements across the board. The Senate version is slightly more pared down. It would remove parking requirements within a half mile of transit and then cap those requirements at a maximum of one per unit everywhere else. This would still be amazing if we were to get it passed, even if it's not the full removal that's in the House version, but this would be fantastic. The second piece here, yes, in God's backyard. It basically allows faith-based institutions to build multifamily housing by right on land that they already own. And the idea that churches, synagogues, mosques, they have a presence in the community. Often, many of them own a lot of land, and so could be a good area where if we made it a little bit easier to build some homes, then these trusted community institutions could build some housing that their communities desperately need. And then the last kind of major piece of the new Senate bill is that it would add inclusionary zoning to the list of zoning reforms that could be passed with a simple majority vote. Right now, if a municipality wants to pass an inclusionary zoning ordinance, and by inclusionary zoning, meaning an ordinance that says if you want to build an apartment with 20 units in it, then a certain percentage of those units need to be income restricted. It would lower the threshold for passing those types of rules from 2/3 majority to a simple majority. Now, there's a lot of policy information in this slide here. So if there are questions that immediately come up, I can try to answer them, or we could just address it at the end here. Yes, and I do see a couple comments here about Boston, correct. So all of these reforms are made to the State Zoning Enabling Act. The State Zoning Enabling Act is separate from Boston, so all these reforms, unfortunately, would not directly apply to Boston, but I am certain are still relevant to the city of Boston and folks who live there because if our state as a whole built a lot more housing, then the rental market and the home buying market in Boston would be a lot more reasonable.
350 cities and towns.
Yeah, 350 cities and towns. Okay. Moving on here. So, getting into the run of show for the day of. The rally is going to begin at 1 o'clock. So we ask that folks arrive between 1 and 1:30. The speaking program is going to begin at 1:30 p.m. sharp. Right now, who we have lined up is Representative Andy Vargas and State Senator Brendan Creighton, who are our primary sponsors of the IMB bill. You'll probably also hear from Jesse, and then we're also still working on a few more speakers. If those come through, we'll announce those in the coming days. That's our speaking program right now. Like I said, since we are starting at 1:30 sharp, do ask that you arrive beforehand. That's also a great time to hang out and hopefully foster some of those connections that I spoke about earlier. After the speaking program ends, we're going to transition from the front steps of the State House into conference room 428. So this is a room that we've reserved inside the State House. We're allocating about 40 minutes to do so because folks will need to go through security. It doesn't take too long, but just a lot of people. It'll take a little, a decent amount of time. We'll have some wayfinders who are kind of stationed throughout the building to help you get there. Um, but yeah, after the speaking program ends, we'll all kind of shift then into this room that we've reserved in the State House where we'll formally check in, get folks situated with the materials that they'll need for the meetings or for the lit drops, and connected with your fellow meeting members. And so that's going to happen. The first meetings are scheduled to begin at 2:45 and we'll run, you know, this part of the day, I guess, will run roughly from 2:45 to 4 p.m., depending exactly on when your meeting starts and how long the lit drops take. Our reservation for room 428 ends at 4:30. So at the very latest, we'll all have to be out by then. I just wanted to add, show this nice picture from our lobby day 2 years ago with our great speaking program and to get people a visual of what this will look like. Okay. So the meeting overviews. As I mentioned, there's going to be meetings and lit drops. So starting with the meetings, these are going to be pre-organized. We're already emailing legislators right now to try to set up these meetings. Should note that we're looking for at least 3 registrants per district before we set up the meeting so that there is kind of a critical mass of folks there. And if some folks can't make it the day of, then there still is somebody to hold that meeting. If you're in a meeting, it'll kick off with the group leader who introduces AHMA and goes over the meeting agenda. A quick word on the group leaders. You may remember when you registered for Lobby Day, there was a section on the form that indicated whether you might be interested in being a group leader, whether you're unsure, whether you didn't want to be. So the group leaders are going to be the ones that just really help facilitate the meeting. They are going to introduce AHMA. They're going to go over the policy priorities and really make the policy ask and be that kind of captain to steer the meeting and make sure it goes all according to plan. If you did indicate that you're interested in being a group leader, you'll be hearing from me, in the next week or so with some more information and materials and training on how to be that. If you can't remember what you signed up for, which is totally understandable, and are interested in being a group leader, feel free to give me an email and we can see if that's possible. Um, Folks, whether they're a group leader or not, you'll all be connected with those in your meeting before the day of on an email chain. And then, of course, before the meeting starts, we'll try to, get you all together so you can meet beforehand. Um, Okay, so after the group leader starts the meeting and introduces AHMA, then this is going to be a time where every participant in the meeting can share a little bit about themselves, 1 to 2 minutes, to talk about their housing story. I mean, I think that what we found really in previous lobby days and our advocacy generally is that what most resonates with lawmakers is personal stories. Like, why does it matter that, the zoning in your town currently only allows single family homes on 40,000 square lots? What does that mean to you? And making that story personal and really demonstrating the need for these types of reforms and for more housing generally. So I think while it's important, of course, to know the policy agenda and to feel somewhat comfortable talking about it, really what we want you to be focusing on in this day is your story. Why did you come here? Why is it important that we advocate for more homes? And on the next slide, I'll share a little bit about like a framework for crafting your story. Okay, so then once everybody in the meeting has had a chance to introduce themselves, the group leader will go over the policy priorities and make the ask for the legislator to support those priorities. If there are any questions that the legislator or staff have, can answer that. Of course, if legislator or their staff member asks a question that you don't know the answer to, that's perfectly fine. Can just make a note of that, and then when we do the feedback after these meetings, we can try to answer those questions and follow up as needed. And then lastly, of course, at the end of the meeting, thanking them for the meeting. We're trying as hard as we can to get as many actual legislators themselves to be in these meetings, but I think folks should be prepared that, sometimes if a legislator can't make it, or they're not available, it could be their chief of staff or their policy aide, like someone like that. But we're really, really trying to hard to get legislators themselves. Okay, so sharing your story. Just want to throw out a couple example prompts here. Of course, we'll be sending around the slide deck afterwards, so don't need to write this all down now. But some examples, just a way to kick off your story, get yourself thinking about how do I talk about this? Was there a particular experience that brought you to your advocacy at this point in your life? Can you find somewhere to live that is suitable for the lifestyle that you want to live or that you see yourself living in the next few years? And why or why not is that possible? As I mentioned, we've developed a framework to hopefully help folks in developing their story. You, of course, don't have to use this framework, but we're sending it out there in case it is helpful. So the first piece of this, establishing a baseline, meeting legislators and meeting people where they are. And for us, that mostly boils down to housing is too expensive. And that makes it difficult for me or my family to be able to afford the home that we want in the community that we want to live in. Secondly, identifying the problem, our housing shortage, which is really the problem that we're focused on, which directly leads to competition between residents. And it's that competition in those bidding wars that really drive up home prices. Thirdly, emphasizing the impact. Again, these are some examples here. You can take them for how relevant they are to your life, but I can't afford to stay in the city or town that I grew up in. Whether you're a teacher or a first responder yourself, or somebody who can't afford to live in the communities that they serve, we found that to be a really compelling message. Something that resonates particularly for me, I'm still counting myself as a young person, is that young people are leaving for more affordable states. I think this is something that we've seen the governor really pick up on in particular. And I think it's an important data point for folks who care about the future of Massachusetts, is that a lot of young people are moving to New Hampshire, North Carolina, Georgia, other states that are more affordable because they just simply can't afford to buy a home or rent a home in Massachusetts. Fourth, pointing to solutions. Here's just an example, little thing here about parking flexibility, rules that force home builders to overbuild parking. It wastes space, it adds unnecessary costs, and by enabling parking flexibility, we can make it easier to build new homes and rein in home prices. Not saying you have to talk about parking flexibility, but I think you want to be thinking, okay, problem, what's the impact, what's the solution, and then finally highlighting the benefits. If we make these changes, I can live in the community of my choice. I can gain access to the financial and personal security of living in an affordable home. I can plant roots and invest in my community. A million amazing things that you can do when you live in a place that you can afford and are comfortable in. Um, but it's really important to, of course, highlight what those benefits are. Okay, so the policy asks, and remember, just in terms of the meeting structure, uh, introducing AHMA, people introducing themselves, sharing their stories, now getting to the policy asks. A lot of this will be familiar from the slide deck about what's in the bill. We're really leading with parking flexibility this year. And specifically, we are asking for the legislature to adopt the language that is included in the Senate YIMBY bill. As a reminder, that would remove parking requirements within a half mile of transit and cap those requirements at one per unit everywhere else. There's a couple of reasons that we're really, leaning on this. One is that, of course, we truly believe in the policy and have seen it work in other places, but also we think that there might be some more support across chambers for this policy in particular. The second one is the small multifamily housing by right. Again, as a reminder, this is legalizing up to 5 homes on lots connected to water and sewer and up to 3 homes on non-connected lots. For folks who've been tracking the state of zoning in Massachusetts and the Massachusetts Zoning Atlas, might be shocked to realize that how few municipalities and how little land in the state you can build even, small multifamily housing like a duplex or a triplex. And we feel that it's, pretty important that there's kind of a baseline ground level of the types of homes that should be allowed in municipalities across the state. And then the last one here is right sizing lots and and I saw some comments in the chat about the starter homes initiative, kind of getting at that angle where it's really difficult to build a starter home if municipalities are requiring 40,000 square foot minimum lot sizes. And so we're asking that the legislature either remove or reduce those minimum lot size requirements. Okay. Then lastly, and this applies, whether you're doing the lit drop or the meeting, just want to remember your audience. You're talking to elected officials. It's okay to mention the public opinion polling data on this issue. And this is all linked on our website. 84% of voters want state lawmakers to take action to address the housing shortage. Something that might come up is that, of course, the legislature passed the Affordable Homes Act last session, and they've passed the MBTA Communities Act, and that they have been doing a lot of, housing reform work, which they have, and want to acknowledge that. Like those are real initiatives that have been making a difference, but there's still a desire for continued action. There's still a need to do more. Secondly, a majority of voters support key sections of the YIMBY bill. I believe this ranges from around 52 or 53% up to, nearly 70% support for some of the various provisions. Again, all this information on our website. And then also, interestingly, remembering that they're elected officials, is that a majority of voters in our last poll said that they would favor legislative candidates who prioritize expanding housing supply over those who preserve local control to block new housing. And I think we really want to emphasize these talking points here is because the dominant narrative is that people don't want reform. People don't want more housing in their communities. They don't want to see local control go away. And while, of course, those attitudes exist and they're very much real, there are significant majorities, there are a significant section of the population that does want to see change, that does want to see housing built. And it's not just those no voices that are present in their districts. Okay, and as I said, our website has the full polling data from our 2026 poll and then our 2025 poll. So we have 2 years worth of data that folks can reference. Okay, how am I doing on time? All right, pretty good. All right, so as I mentioned, you're either going to be paired in a legislative meeting or you're going to be doing lit drops, and that really depends on how many other members in your districts sign up for a lobby day. Unfortunately, if there's a district where only you're the only person who signed up, I think that better use of the time is to do these lit drops. And by lit drops, I mean that a participant, and we'll pair you up into groups of like 3 or 4 people, will deliver information materials directly to lawmakers' offices. And really why they're important is because it allows us to hit every office. If right now, looking at the meetings that we have scheduled, they're mostly clustered on the North Shore and in Greater Boston. We can't just rely on North Shore and Greater Boston legislators to get this stuff through. And so we need to make sure that all legislators are getting our information, hearing from us, making our voice heard. So these lit drops allow for that to happen. So if you're one of the participants who's doing a literature drop, what you'll do when you visit an office is, of course, you'll introduce yourself. You'll hand off the materials that we have prepared for you. This will be a kind of standard form letter to that state rep or state senator, a one pager about the EMB bill, and then some one pagers on our polling data that I just went over. Um, of course, we'll round out that visit by encouraging the legislator or their staff to please support the EMB bill, and if it turns into a longer conversation and the staff member or the legislator wants to talk, that's amazing. And you can have a little impromptu meeting there. But that's kind of the general format of these lit drops. And we don't have to read all this right now, but we have written out right here just a little script for those lit drops to help folks who are doing those. Like I said, when we send this around, we'll be able to review it. And of course, in advance of the day, you'll know beforehand whether you're set up in a lit drop pairing or in a legislator meeting. Okay, so we're coming to the end here, preparing for lobby day. The first picture here, we're gonna have t-shirts again. So whatever you're wearing, just know that you're gonna be able to have a nice t-shirt to choose from. My personal favorite look, I think, is the professional look with the t-shirt pulled on over it, but of course, jeans and sneakers are more than fine. Um, in all seriousness, no, of course, as I mentioned, please make a plan for arriving on time, sometime between 1 and 1:30. Check the train schedules and parking availability. There's actually pretty decent parking in downtown Boston, including the parking garage under the Boston Common. So if you're driving in, that's probably the one that I would go to. That's the closest, but there are other garages around Boston. But highly encourage the T. If you're coming from a further away place on the commuter rail, we're able to help with some reimbursements. So again, just let us know if that's going to be a barrier for you. Wear comfy shoes between the rally, walking around. You're going to be on your feet a little bit, so plan accordingly. Fourth, review informational materials. We're going to be sending around, as I mentioned, this slide deck and other information about the bill in advance. So brush up on those, hopefully you can feel reasonably comfortable. And then lastly, practice saying your story out loud. It's amazing. Even if you think you have it in your head, you get into the meeting, and then all of a sudden you forget where you were born or where you live. And if you say it out beforehand, it really helps. Okay, that really brings us to the end of the presentation here. I really appreciate everyone who decided to join. Appreciate everyone who's showing up and is here to advocate for more homes. Really, we're a people-powered organization, and we need to show that to demonstrate that at the State House. So you all participating here and then participating on the 27th is really, really impactful. I hesitate to say that if you have to show up to one AHMA event this year, make it this one because we have a ton of great events throughout the year. But this is really this is the final push for the state legislative session for our state policy agenda. So if you want to see some change, this is the day to do it. See some folks are dropping off, so we'll wrap it up. Thank you all. Really appreciate the time. Talk to you soon. If not soon, I'll see you all on the 27th.